We will be looking at contempt of court and the recent call for the arrest of senior public officers. In recent times, there have been a lot of call for the arrest of the senior officers. Recently, we had the Inspector General of Police to be arrested 3 months in prison, and that's what was stipulated for the Inspector General of Police for disobeying a court order. That was the reason. And then we also had an Abuja High Court sitting in Maitama had convicted the chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, for contempt of court. And the EFCC chairman was convicted in relation to an anti-graft agency's failure to comply with an earlier order of the court. Also, a federal high court in Minna, Niger State capital, has ordered that the Chief of Army Staff, General Farouk Yahya, be arrested for contempt. And Justice Halima Abdulmalik, who issued the warrants and presided over the case, said that the order followed a notice brought before the court in pursuant to Order 42, Rule 10 of the Niger State High Court Civil Procedure of 2018. So this morning we'll be taking an overview of the content of court, what this means, and at what point should someone be convicted for contempt of law, and content of the court, rather. And right now we are being joined in the studio by Bode Fadikbe Esquire. He is a legal practitioner and the CEO of Sage Consulting and Communication. It's good to have you join us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Good morning and welcome to the program.
A different identity entirely, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Different from what most people used to know, but it's okay. I mean, that's the beauty of life, dynamism.
Yes. So, contempt of court, to the layman, is just a legal slang, and this has been making the rounds in the past few weeks. What does contempt of court mean? Take us through that. Let's start with that.
Thank you very much. Well, yes, for a layman, a legal slang, but I will advise that you shouldn't take it just as a legal slang. It's one of the most serious issues that courts deal with. Courts take contempt of court very seriously, and I like to emphasize very seriously. Now, what's the jurisprudence behind it, or what's the legal thinking behind it? Courts are created for the purpose of having sanity in the society. There are two things amongst so many others that courts take very seriously. There's what is called jurisdiction, and then the issue of contempt of court. For jurisdiction, it means their power to determine a particular matter. So, for instance, under our law in this country, you cannot take matters concerning customs, tax, because that's a federal issue. You cannot take it to the High Court. It has to be the Federal High Court. So, for instance, you cannot take matters concerning customs to the federal, FCT High Court. It can only be the Federal High Court. Just as you cannot take labor matters to any court except the National Industrial Court. And that's why you see that ASU's matter went to the National Industrial Court. If you take it to any other court, the court will say, I lack the jurisdiction to deal with this matter. Because even at the Supreme Court level, you can raise the issue of jurisdiction. So your matter could even move from the court of first instance, this time around the High Court. It can go to the first appellate level, which is the appeal court in this instance, because there are also other appellate levels. And then it can get to the Supreme Court, and it escapes those other levels of judicial intervention, and then gets to the Supreme Court. And one of the counsels or one of the parties to the matter say, my lord, there is jurisdiction issue in this matter. Supreme Court says you can raise it at that level. And once you successfully raise it, it cancels everything that you have done from the beginning. But that's not the focus of this conversation. The focus of this conversation is contempt of court. Now, every court issues an order, and that order is expected to be complied with. No court will allow itself to be disparaged or brought into disrepute by anybody whatsoever. And that stems from the fact that everybody is equal before the law, and there is nobody that is above the law. Nobody. Maybe in this country we have had exceptional circumstances, and I do admit very clearly for unwholesome reasons. Because for a society to be so-called, one of the parameters with which you determine this level of civilization or this level of civility of a society is that everyone, from Mr. President down to the least, brings himself under the authority and control of the law. And for any society to make progress, the judicial system is a measuring rod. So when the court sits and issues an order, that order, and is deliberately called an order, that order is not an advice, it's an order that is expected to be complied with. If you don't comply with it, then you must show reason, justifiable, why you did not comply with it.
So the exceptions now.
Oh, there can be exception. Maybe, for instance, I don't want to go into too many legal jargons. You could obtain a judgment by default, and then you come back to court to say, my lord, or it could be even be obtained fraudulently. And then you can come back to say, my lord, this judgment was not properly obtained. However, one thing is very, very clear. No matter how bad a judgment is, it is expected to be obeyed. First and foremost, if there's going to be any challenge, you have a right. That's why there is a right of appeal. And then you can now apply for a stay. The appeal itself is not a stay, does not serve as a stay. You will bring an application asking the court to stay the execution of its own judgment while you are going on the appeal. So these are legal situations that help the society to have sanity. Courts will frown, and I say it again, every court will frown at any attempt to bring it into disrepute. That's why the word contempt is used. And there are two types. You either do it in the face of the court, which is contempt in facie curiae. Let me know again.
Oh, that's huge.
Okay.
So let me just put it that contempt in the face of the court or contempt outside of the face of the court. Now, the one in the face of the court is the one you do right in front of the court.
Okay. So what kind of activities, or rather statements, would you do that constitutes a contempt?
I mean, you could be very rude in court. Maybe because when you are when you are giving evidence in court, or your conduct generally. But let's take for instance, the one that is very common. You are giving evidence in court, and you are using a language that is unbecoming. See, the court. Look at it from this perspective. The court is a temple of justice. It's similar to your church, it's similar to your mosque, or maybe for the African traditional worshippers, it's similar to the shrine. You don't go to the mosque or to the church or to the shrine to misbehave. You are expected to conduct yourself in a particular manner that is worthy of that court. And one of the ways by which you conduct yourself is either in your character or in what you say. When they are asking you question in court, it is not the lawyer that is asking the question. It is the judge that is sitting in that court. And that's why you don't look at the lawyer, you look at the judge. Because it's the one asking you the question, but it's being done on behalf of the judge by the lawyer. The lawyer himself is a minister in the temple of justice. And when you come into the temple of justice, you are expected to conduct yourself in a decorous manner. You see, the beauty of the law or the ugliness of it is not in the elegance of the drafting or the inelegance in the drafting. By which I mean that you could have a bad law. You could have a law badly drafted. The ugliness is not in the bad drafting. The ugliness is in the disobedience of the law. The beauty of the law is not in the elegance of the drafting. The beauty of it is in the obedience of the law. And that's why when the law is at work, it's a force that forces people to do what the law says should be done.
Now we have public offices being charged for contempt of law. EFCC chairman, the chief, army chief, and then we have the commandant too was, part of all of this. And contempt of law, there are immunity clauses, right, for state governors. And these are public officers, holding very big positions. At what point or what class of people do we say they have immunity? And does this contempt of law now, in context as we're discussing, does it apply to state governors, presidents as well? Since
there are only two people that enjoy legal benefit for immunity.
Okay.
And that's the governor or the governors and the president and the vice president.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Those are the only people that you cannot do anything to if they do any wrong while in office.
Wow.
To the extent of civil matters.
Okay.
But criminal matters, they are expected to answer for it.
After they leave office?
After they leave office. While they are in office, you can sue them if they do anything wrong. You sue their office and things like that. So the point we're trying to make is that for every other person, they are not expected to be exempted. Whoever you are not expected to be exempted from the operations of the law. If anything, you are guided. For those people that enjoy immunity, the whole essence is to limit the distraction that litigation brings when they are doing official work. Otherwise, every other person, no other person has been exempted to the best of our knowledge of the law in this country. So whoever has contravened the law, whoever has been asked to do something or asked not to do something and goes ahead to do it or not to do it is subject to the law. Even Mr. President himself is subject to the law because he's guided by the Constitution. The governors themselves, the deputy governors, the vice president, they are guided by the Constitution. So to that extent, they are still under the law. But when it comes to litigations, they are allowed that latitude just to keep them in focus so that they can concentrate on the issues of state. So any other person, and you will see incidentally, and this is quite interesting for me, the three people that have been mentioned or that are in focus currently are big men.
Right.
Now that tells me something, that we have a tendency that we need to be very careful about. Because if you ask the ordinary man on the street to obey the law, you that is asking the ordinary man on the street to obey the law has a responsibility to also obey the law. You have that responsibility because your occupation of that place is not just a legal occupation, there is also a moral occupation on your path. If as a parent, I tell my child, don't come back home by 10 p.m. You must return back to this house under any circumstance by maximum, say 8 p.m. But if there are going to be exceptions, then you let me know. And that's why the court says, if you think this order that has been issued has not been issued properly or you have issues with it, you can come back to court.
That's after you must have obeyed.
Yes. You can come back to court and say, my lord, for this reason, for this reason, for this reason, we think this order should be reversed. But you must first of all obey. That's the way society works, and that's the way it's supposed to work.
Okay.
Now,
I really want to ask this.
Yes.
Do you think there's enough education out there to just a normal layman, as we call them, about what
Incidentally, ignorance
contempt
of the law,
constitutes?
ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
excuse.
That's
court.
what makes it interesting.
Absolutely.
But I do agree with you. I do agree with you. I mean, if you have a matter in court, that's why your lawyer is there. Your lawyer ought to let you know that once the court speaks, you have a responsibility to obey. As a matter of fact, there are instances where the court had spoken, spoken in a very strong way to lawyers, because the lawyer is supposed to educate his client, say, look, this court has given an order. Because if you allow the client to bring the court into disrepute, it will be a bad day for the society. It will be a bad day for the society when people no longer obey the order of a lawfully constituted court. It will just be chaos. It will be anarchy in the society. Nobody will do anything properly again. People will just do things and walk away freely. And by allowing that kind of situation, you are calling for anarchy.
Okay, now that we have, sentences being meted on these officers that have, derailed from the path of the law, is there an exception? Is there a way that, they can appeal and then don't serve this sentence, or they have to serve the sentence and then come back to court and continue with the matter?
Well, again, they can appeal that judgment or that order of court. They have that right. I mean, the Federal High Court is not a court of, it's not the last court of, it's not the last point where pronouncement can be made and it becomes irreversible. No, the Supreme Court is the one that has that exclusive jurisdiction, or the State High Court, or any court for that matter. The only court that is imbued with that jurisdiction, that power, is the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court speaks, nothing changes it except by prerogative of mercy power that is exercised only by Mr. President, particularly in criminal matters. So if somebody is convicted for a crime and the matter gets to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court says we uphold the position of the lower courts, the only person that can change it is Mr. President, under the prerogative of mercy power that has been donated to him by the Constitution. But if you feel that an order of court has been made and you think that that order has been made wrongly, you have a right of appeal. You have a right to go back to court and say. But you see, the problem that we have here, which I think is the problem that we are looking at, who is going to effect the order of the court on these public office holders that we are talking about?
Security, big man.
That's the
court. Yes.
See, who is going to arrest the IG of police?
Yes, they are responsible for enforcement.
Exactly, so that it's dicey.
Because under normal circumstances, the police is the strongest law enforcement agent within the territorial, space of a country.
Absolutely.
The military, they have their presence in the country as well, but oftentimes they deal with external aggression. And for our military, I think they have the advantage of both sides. They deal with external aggression, they deal with internal aggression. If it's becoming more than what the police and maybe some other security agencies can deal with, and it's understandable from that perspective. And the way we have run this country is such that you issue an order for the IG to be arrested and brought to court. Now tell me the person that is going to arrest the IG. The only person perhaps in this instance now, the only agency that may be able to arrest the IG is maybe the military, because that's a counterforce.
Though the military has defaulted as well. So
I'm laying a foundation. But Mr. President can also, through the Attorney General of the Federation, because that's a very, very important office in this instance, or through the National Security Advisor, or from the Security Council level, say, IG, obey the court order. I mean, we saw what happened to Tafa Balogun in this country. It was because Mr. President gave an instruction But that is not the kind of thing we should ordinarily operate. Institutions should be stronger and bigger than individuals. Right. That's the kind of society. So that institutions will respond naturally to their call to duty. So if somebody has done anything wrong, so that there can be that sanctity and respect for the rule of law. The law, that's you will say that the symbol of justice is a blindfolded woman. I really don't understand why you have used a woman now. But let's even leave the gender. The symbol of justice is a blind, so that, and you see that he's always carrying the scale and holding a sword. When the scale tilts against anybody or any institution, the sword is swung, and anybody's blood that is spilled in the circumstance is immaterial. It could even be the mother or the husband or the child of the symbol of justice. I don't care.
That's a lot of power.
That's a lot of power.
I don't care. The sword is swung, and then the law take its course.
Okay. I think this brings me to this question. Do you really think that Nigerians have trust in our judicial system?
I think they do, but they also have their concern. I think they do. I mean, that's why because again, there is the court of public opinion. When justice has been done and has been seen to have been done.
Exactly. I think that is where...
Yes.
I need us to note that expression. Justice is not just done, but is seen to have been done.
Right.
You will see the community, the people rejoicing.
Right.
Most of the time, this expression takes place when you see that an armed robber is, molested, which is wrong, but I'm just using that example. You see people rejoicing, hey, he has gotten justice and stuff like that. It's not the right thing. That is jungle justice, resort to self-help. We're supposed to take the person through the judicial process. So goes through the judicial process and the person is convicted. Maybe the person killed somebody and the person is convicted and the court says he should die, he or she should die by hanging, and the person is eventually hung and the person dies. Society expresses satisfaction that justice has been done. Or take, for instance, and with due respect to you women here and all the women out there, a woman is raped and the rapist is convicted and made to serve sentence. Everybody says, yes, he has gotten what he deserves.
Right.
Do you get what I'm saying? So justice must not only be done, it must be seen to have been done. We have instances where people have come out to say, yes, this judgment is a sound piece of legal reasoning. And there are also instances where people have come out to say, oh, we think there are issues with this judgment. We think there are issues with this judgment. We think that we have reservations.
Or perhaps the judgment is taking too long.
Too long, exactly.
Yes, conviction.
Again, we need to be careful here. The expression is that justice is slow, but sure-footed. But justice delayed is also justice denied. So we must be able to balance both sides. You don't rush at giving judgment, but you also don't let it linger for too long. If you say somebody has committed a crime and the punishment for that crime is 5 years and is already 7 years in detention, trial has not started. Of course, you have violated his fundamental human right to freedom of movement, to liberty. You have violated it. Because even if he had been convicted of that offense, he wouldn't have spent more than 5 years. But here he is. He has been in police custody or any other custody for that matter for far more than the number of years that the law prescribes.
So what happened in such instance?
Of course, he's entitled to compensation for damage. He's entitled to payment of damages.
How many such cases do we see?
You may not know, but there are, if you go to the Ministry of Justice, the death hanging on this country is huge in terms of damages to be paid. You may not know, because that's where people go to ask for their money. If the state has offended you, because custodial responsibility is in the hands of the state. If police arrest a man, for instance, and he's been kept there. I mean, I think there was one notorious case in Abuja, the Apple 6 or something like that.
Yes.
I don't know how many of us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know what happened to, I mean, those victims. They were, if I remember very well, they were coming from a party and they ran into some checkpoints, and all of a sudden they lost their lives and things like that. Okay, so such situations, of course, the state must pay. Although no amount that is paid can be equal to the life of somebody. The law will be very happy to allow a criminal to escape than to convict the wrong person. The law is very happy to allow a criminal to escape than to convict the wrong person. That's the position. And that's why when it comes to criminal matters, the law takes its time to ensure that the person to be convicted is the right person that has committed the offense. The person to be convicted is the right person that has committed the offense. And you will see that from the explanation of these three public officers, I was not the one that was on seat when the court gave the order. I was not the sitting IG. I was not, I mean, they gave their reasons. But you see, the thing with public administration is that it is a continuum. I am there today. I am not likely to be there tomorrow. Somebody else comes in. So the responsibility of the new person is to take historical account of what had happened, especially when it comes to issues like this, and say, okay, look, what are the legal issues pending? Do we have any pending court judgment, any pending court order that we must obey that we have not obeyed? If we have not obeyed, have we taken the necessary steps? Those are the decent things, or those are the things that ought to take place in a decent society.
Well, it looks like most of them.
But yes, now and again, because the ordinary man, take for instance when Rocha Sokorosha, when the EFCC invited Rocha Sokorosha, and he did not respond, and he was giving an excuse. Oh, I'm a presidential aspirant in the AP. The EFCC went into his house through the ceiling. They went into his house. I mean, we all saw the video on the social media where the family knelt down and they were praying, oh, Jesus, help me. Look, even Jesus himself is not disobedient to the law. When he got to the time to pay tax, he said, this is the money for tax. Take. He obeyed the law. So EFCC went to that place and got into his house and got him arrested because you must obey the law whoever you are. You must.
Regardless.
Regardless of whoever you are, you must obey the law.
But we have this disparity in the society, especially in Nigeria, where you have, the common man, judgment is being given as soon as possible, and then we have.
It's an aberration, I dare say.
Okay.
It's an aberration.
Okay.
It's an aberration. Let me jump into that conversation. It's an aberration.
All right.
I mean, because the law, if the law is a respecter of persons, it won't be blindfolded. That woman that is a symbol of justice, we prefer to allow his boyfriend or husband or children or family members to go away and punish those who are not his family members. But because he's no respecter of person, that's why it's blindfolded, so that when it is taking a decision, it's not looking at the emotions. It's not looking at the relationship. It's not looking at the sentiments. It's dealing with the cold facts of the law.
Of course, we know that the law can be tilted. One problem a lot of people have with the law, especially in Nigeria, is the way our constitution is being put together and some of the laws that supports the constitution. it can be tilted, and you can see the guilty one smiling out of the court at the end of the judgment. And it happens mostly with the person, the big shots in the country. It's a thing of concern, actually. Starting the legal year, the CGN said it will not be business as usual. And we hope that it's not business as usual as we
Maybe that's why we're having what you want to call, in some quarters you call it judicial rascality, and in some quarters you say judicial activism. I mean, because suddenly we see our courts coming up with that amount of courage to say, look, I'm making a pronouncement on this, go for 3 months imprisonment because you have disobeyed my order, or go and, I mean, how do you ask one man to go and catch a python?
Well,
You know, there's a saying in my place that it's because the snake moves alone, that's why it can be killed. Imagine that a python is coming, a boa is coming, an anaconda is going along with it. Who will dare stand before it? Do you get what I'm saying? So, if the court now says, if the court now has that courage, because the court is supposed to come with courage, no matter how small the court is, it's supposed to come with courage.
Right.
If the court now says, arrest the chief of army staff, and you know the security network around the chief of army staff, then you want to say that, yes, this is a demonstration of courage. And that's the kind of thing we need our courts to be able to do. Look at the person in the face, straight in the face, and say, you are wrong. I pronounce, I hold as such. And you see, the interesting thing is that the court will always say, in my opinion, according to law, you are wrong. If you think you are not wrong, you have the right to go upstairs. If you get upstairs, you get to the second floor of the building, and still you don't obtain justice, go to the third floor, which is the Supreme Court. I said the Supreme Court says we are final, not because they are the most intelligent, but the law says they are fine. If you are not happy, go to heaven.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Fadikbe. Barrister Bode Fadikbe has been our guest.
The legal profession does not.
Yes.
The legal profession says no. At best, you just put it Esquire.
Esquire. It's important, you know, the layman understands the barrister in front.
That's true. You know, we are
during the introduction, we used the word Esquire.
Exactly.
You know, that was
agree.
professional. Now let's bring it home.
You know, we are title loving people in this country, but it's okay. I mean, it helps us to situate this the discussion. And
yes, it's been an eye-opening conversation on the Daybreak this morning. Exactly. And our guest has been Bode Fadikbe, Esquire. He is a legal practitioner and the CEO of Sage Consulting and Communication. Thank you so much for being
my
on.
pleasure. It's been a wonderful time out here.
And we hope to pull you again next time.
No problem.
Yes, of course. We have to pull him again. You know, when you talk about human angle stories and anything that concerns citizens, Nigerians,
Very interesting
beyond,
to talk.
it's very interesting because, you know, we're going through so much already. So we need answers. We need the government to respond. We need judiciary
I agree.
to respond.
As I drove in this morning, I saw the queues at the fuel station, and I was there for about 3 hours yesterday. I don't want to remember my experience. 3-4 hours.
That's fair
Yeah.
for what people are going through. 3 hours is fair. And that's it on Daybreak today.